We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Hi everybody, this is Paula Schaffner with episode 20, Mork's Night Out. This first aired on March 8th, 1979, a couple days after the Happy Days episode, Mork Returns. The IMDb synopsis is, while Mindy's out of town, Mork drags Mr. Bickley to a singles bar, where they meet a nefarious mother and daughter. This was directed by Howard Storm, his 12th of 59 Mork and Mindy episodes. It was the fourth Mork and Mindy script by Dale McRaven, and the third one for Bruce Johnson. It's also the third Mr. Bickley episode, and he's in it quite a bit, as you could guess from that synopsis. We start in Mork and Mindy's apartment. Fred knocks and asks, "Are you dressed, honey?" Mork says from upstairs, "Just my shorts, jockey," as in jockey shorts. Fred enters with Cora, and Mindy comes in from her bedroom carrying an overnight bag. She says she's not looking forward to this weekend. Cora agrees and says she would rather have her nose pierced. This is the punk era, but I don't think that's a joke about punk rockers. Fred agrees with both of them, but he says it's an obligation. Mindy says she hasn't even told Mork yet. She feels so bad about running out and leaving him stranded for the whole weekend. It seems a little bit late to be telling him this, even if it was difficult. Mork comes downstairs and he's wearing tourist clothes and he's singing "It's a Long Way to Alpha Centauri" to the tune of "It's a Long Way to Tipperary." He beeps and his silver travel case jumps down from the attic and into his hand. He calls himself the Doug Henning of the Sky Caps, which is a reference to the magician. He encourages them to get going and he sings a bit of the song "Hit the Road, Jack." Fred says Durango is a long, unpleasant drive from here, and Durango is about 6.5 hours from Boulder, mostly south, but slightly to the west. Fred says Mork wouldn't want to go there. And then Mork sings "My Kind of Town," the song that's usually about Chicago, but of course, in his version, it's about Durango. Cora says it's a windy, twisty, car-sicky trip. Mork says he'll love it. He stayed up all night, and he shows them his Instamatic glove that has a whole thumb of film. He says that he overheard them last night, and he apologizes for eavesdropping, but he says since Watergate, anything's free. Yet another Watergate joke. And that explains how he's ready to go so quickly since he's been planning this since last night. He says that he made plans, he's got his silly clothes, and he even made a map.
It's topographical and scratch and smell. There's L.A. Woo! Bad news. Over here. Look at this. We'll start off in Boulder, then we'll go a little bit out of the way to the Grand Canyon. We'll go over here to New York. We'll spend autumn in New York. Then we'll drive over to Paris, spend spring in Paris, watch the leaves change. Then we'll go to Iran and watch the governments change. Shah, Shah, I told you so. Shah, Shah.
1979 definitely was a time of governments changing in Iran. The Iranian Revolution led to the Shah going into exile on January 16th. After this episode aired, on April 1st, the Islamic Republic began, and then the Ayatollah Khomeini became the supreme leader in December. I'm not sure when this episode is set, but Mork is planning their travel for the fall and the spring. When they keep insisting that he can't go, he says, "Do my eyes deceive my ears? You must be pulling my crivets." And I'm not sure if we've had the word crivets before. They're going to see Uncle Jack, and I'm not clear if this is Mindy's uncle or Fred's uncle or how he fits into the family tree. Fred says that Uncle Jack is sick, and he acts out what Mork guesses is a drunken mime. Mindy insists that Mork wouldn't want to go. She says Uncle Jack is a little strange. Cora says she's never liked him since the time he spat on her, and that was because she's trying to choke him with his tie. He turned a lovely shade of purple. Fred says Jack had it coming because he was drunk. So obviously something more is going on than simple alcoholism. We don't get any more details, and I don't know if Uncle Jack ever comes up on the show again. Mindy says that this is a sickness and Jack wants to get better. So suddenly they switch from jokes about drunkenness to treating alcoholism seriously. She says that Jack checked himself into a hospital. Fred says that Jack's wife wanted them to come down to see him and give him moral support. Mork calls himself Mork the Compassionate. He says he was almost a saint, which, if true, is odd because I'm still not clear how religion works on Ork or if it even exists. He says they can skip the Grand Canyon and they'll be with Jack by happy hour, which is not compassionate or sensitive. Mindy finally says he can't go because it's a family matter and it would be hard for Jack to have a perfect stranger see him like this. And although she's telling the truth, it does feel a little bit hard on Mork that he's being told he's not part of the family. Obviously, Mork is not an easy person to introduce, and if Jack is a difficult person in general, I can see why they'd be hesitant to have them mixed together. Mork says it's all right. He's a sensitive life form, and he means sensitive to other people. He says he's not some Venusian paramecium that was evolved yesterday. Mindy asks if he'll be all right on his own for the weekend. He hasn't been alone for any period of time since he's been here.
Hey, Mindy, let me lay out some hard, cold facts. I'm the type of guy who's my own best friend. I'm interesting, I'm amazing, I can hold interesting conversations even with Tom Snyder. Are you ever bored when you're alone with me?
No, but
Then neither am I. Same guy, some amazing personality.
Fred says that when you're used to somebody being around, it's hard when they're gone. Mork says it's just for the weekend, but he seems very aware of how much time precisely this will be, not just simply 48 hours, but he counts the minutes, literally. On the other hand, he says that he knows some Alpha Centurions that take that long for coffee breaks. Of course, they do have 100-gallon mugs. Cora says they should be going.
goodbye, Mork.
Yeah, you kids get out of here. Come on, before I kick you out. Take a hike. Come on, get out.
Well, then I'll see you Sunday night.
Ciao, have a fantastic time, and hey, don't worry about me because I've got thousands of things to do. I'm going to build that nuclear reactor for the hot tub you've been wanting for a long time.
Okay.
Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye. I'm so stinking bored!
I had to check the date on this. The 3 Mile Island nuclear accident was actually on March 28th of that year. But we are definitely moving into 1979, which was a much more dramatic year in some ways than 1978. Just a series of disasters and unexpected events. I thought that this was a reference, but jokes about nuclear power definitely existed before 3 Mile Island. Probably made this even more timely during summer reruns. Of course, there's another hot tub mention. We get a daytime exterior of the house, and there's no more snow, so possibly we're into springtime now. Mork is singing "A Million Bottles of Beer on the Wall," and I think he said it was for the 10th time. And he's tossing cards into a pile as a game, and he's losing against himself. He sits down on the couch between the upside-down teddy bear, which I believe was the gift that Mindy's old fiancé gave her in A Mommy for Morky. And on the other side of Mork is Moo Moo the moose, who we haven't seen in a while. Mork says that Mindy has been gone for 24 hours and he's going crazy. So remember, she was going to be gone for 48, and so we're halfway through, but we'll see that she doesn't actually stay away the full 48. Mork tells the teddy bear to not look at him like that, and he says at least the teddy can do yoga. Surprisingly, he doesn't talk to Moo Moo. Mork says that Bickley is out of town, and Susan Taylor is visiting the Broncos. So there's a cheap shot at the Morgan Fairchild character who is presumably dating a whole football team. Then Mork gets an idea, and he grabs the phone book.
Hello, Bob. Oh, glad I caught you at home. Hi, how are you? Great. Good to hear that. Bob, how's the little woman? Fantastic. Hey, Bob, the reason I call... What? Mork. No, you don't know me. Yeah, I just picked your name out of a book. Yeah. I know with a name like Bob Lipschitz, you got to be a fun kind of guy. What? Bob, how about you and I getting together? What? Bob? Bad connection.
Although Lipschitz is an actual last name, I can see why it was chosen for humorous effect and gave Robin Williams the opportunity to sort of swear on camera. Mork comes to the realization that he's a people junkie. He needs conversation and words, and he has a quick little fight with himself. And then he starts going through withdrawal symptoms, which is odd to watch considering the struggles that Robin Williams would have with drug addiction, but it's played lightly and humorously. He runs over to the window and flings it open. He yells down to a guy who's changing the tire of a semi. And we don't see this. This is just all acted out by Robin. The man changing the tire has a tattoo on his face. Mork offers friendship, but he gets a rock through the window. So Mork says, "Oh, an insurance salesman." And that, of course, is a reference to the slogan, "Get a piece of the rock," which I think I talked about on a much earlier episode. Mork says, "Nice throw. You can get a job in front of any American embassy in the world." And, of course, that is another timely joke. Then off camera, we hear Mr. Bickley yelling about the noise, and Mork calls him Bicky. And throughout this episode, he's calling him Bicky and Bick. There's no mention of Mr. Bickley's dog, who's named Bicky, although I do believe we will see his dog again on a future episode. And then Mr. Bickley gets a rock thrown through his window. He says, "Mork, I want to talk to you." And of course, this is what Mork wants. He wants someone to talk to him, and he's not bothered by the fact that Mr. Bickley is angry, because Mr. Bickley is usually in a bad mood. Mork returns the rock that he got, and it hits the man in the middle of the tattoo. So Mork closes the window and tells the man to have a nice nap. Presumably he doesn't actually kill the guy, maybe just knocks him unconscious, but there's some odd and dark undertones in this episode. We go to Mr. Bickley's apartment, and he's pacing, holding a mug. When Mork comes in, Mr. Bickley points out that there are actually 2 holes in the window, and Mork says, "Wow, parallel universe! Same thing happened to me." Mr. Bickley calls him a pea-brain and calls the rock thrower a tree trunk, and Mork says he just wanted a friend.
Mork, you're such a babe in the woods. There are certain things you never do in this world if you want to stay in this world. For example, never gargle with crazy glue.
Crazy glue.
Never tap dance in a minefield.
All right. No tea for 2 or... Yeah.
And never chide a man with a tattoo on his face, even if he's dead.
Mork says that he's bored and lonely. Mr. Bickley can't think of a time when he wasn't bored. Well, except when he was hit by lightning and he wasn't bored in the coma. And like a lot of Mr. Bickley lines, there must be a huge story behind this, but he's led this life where he just sums these things up in one-liners. He also says that when he and his wife got divorced, part of the settlement was that she got to keep the friends. And I don't know if this is the first mention of Mr. Bickley's ex-wife. We will later meet his son. Mork says that he'll find some new friends for Mr. Bickley. There's no dialogue referring to this, but Mr. Bickley goes over to a cabinet on the wall, and inside we can see all those little booze bottles like we've seen in other episodes. And like I said, these are the kind that you would see on airplanes. And he takes one out. Mork says they'll go out and paint the town pink, so I guess it won't be quite as wild as if they paint the town red. Mork wants to go to the movies, so he grabs the newspaper. There's a double bill, Born Free and Women in Chains. Born Free came out in 1966 and was about a lion cub. Women in Chains was actually a 1972 TV movie. I know the joke that they're going for, but it's definitely an odd double bill. Mr. Bickley doesn't like to go anywhere where his feet stick to the floor.
All right. Oh, here's some self-improvement courses. Let's see, there's a speed reading course at the university from 8 o'clock to 8:05.
Forget it.
Wait, here's an ESP course. Strange, doesn't give the address.
Look, I don't want to go to any crummy movies or scuzzy meetings.
Well, let's see. Wait, Vic, here's a wonderful thing. This is a restaurant. Let's see. Harry's Girls and Grill. Topless, bottomless, backless, frontless. Doesn't sound like they give me very much to eat.
Mr. Bickley doesn't want to go out, and he says nothing will change his mind, but when Mork finds a bar called Mother Bell's, where the first drinks are free, Mr. Bickley says to meet him at 7:30. The next scene is set at Mother Bell's, and there are tables with phones on them and little signs with numbers. And most of the tables have couples sitting and talking. The name of Mother Bell's is a pun on the nickname for AT&T, which was Ma Bell. At that time, it was still a monopoly. The waitresses wear red Mother Bell's t-shirts and black hot pants and heels. Bickley and Mork come in, and Mork is in his usual outfit with the bow tie, and Mr. Bickley is actually dressed pretty nicely with a suit and tie. Mr. Bickley says he knew he shouldn't have gone out tonight. They start talking, and a story gradually unfolds. Mr. Bickley swerved to avoid either a chipmunk or a squirrel. He took out the door of a sheriff's car. He hit a black limo that was carrying the governor. Mork says that there's a yin and a yang, although it's actually yin and yang, to everything. He's kind of philosophical about it, that instead of their car going over the cliff, the governor's car went over, and the governor was mad, but not as mad as if he'd actually been in the car at the time. The waitress asks, "Are you boys new?" Mork says Bickley is 45 or 46, and Mork himself is kind of ageless. And I don't know if we got an age for Mr. Bickley before, but something to keep in mind for future episodes. Bickley impatiently says that the waitress was asking if this is their first time here, and yes, it is. The waitress says that Mother Bell's policy is to pay for their first drinks, which we already know, and she gives them little drinks with umbrellas in them. So Mork sings "There's no theater like no theater," which is playing off of the No Business Like Show Business song, and he's singing it in a stereotypical what would have been called Oriental voice, and so it's a pun on no. Bickley says he doesn't want a fruity drink. He wants bourbon and water without the water. Mork orders a Shirley Temple without the curls because he doesn't want a hairball. The waitress starts to leave with the original drinks, but Mr. Bickley asks about the phones. She says they can call anyone in the room, and it's a very friendly place. Mork thinks that he picks good places. Bickley calls him a bubblehead and says that this is a pickup joint. So when the phone buzzes, Mork says, "Ah, pick up the phone."
Hello? Well, I don't think I have one of those. Maybe my friend does. Well, if that was true, I'd have to be 8 feet tall.
I feel like I've heard Robin Williams make that 8 feet tall joke before, and it's very smutty, but because we don't get details, it gets that past the censor. Mr. Bickley says that this is a swinging singles bar, and he's going home. Mork says, "Come on, Bick, it's time to flick," which is a reference to the Bic Lighter slogan. Mr. Bickley talks about his discomfort, and he keeps insisting he wants to go home, but two attractive women enter and ask to join them. So he says he never did get his bourbon. The older woman is named Lisa, and the younger one is named Penny. So Mork says, "Oh, penny for my thoughts," and he says heads or tails. The older woman says, "Watch those thoughts, this is my daughter." And then Mr. Bickley starts stuttering, as he does throughout the rest of the scene. Mork says that the family that plays together stays together, which is a pretty racy line, but it's delivered with Mork's innocence. Penny says it's not like that. Her mom got into town, and Penny wanted to take her out. They had no idea this was a swingers bar.
And you see, what's happened is that there are two fellas over there, and they've been, looking at us.
Oh, you mean those two guys that look like the history of leather?
The women ask the men to pretend to be their dates. Mork agrees, and Bickley stutters and calls for his bourbon. The women ask if they come here often, and Mork says, no, they're a couple of bored and lonely guys looking for meaning in this existence. And Bickley, from this point out, is way behind in the conversation. Penny asks Mork his sign, and he says nefarious, with egg rising. And I feel like he had a different joke answer for his sign in an earlier episode. And I think it was Lisa who asked where they live, and Mork says right here in Boulder. So then Mr. Bickley says Libra. Mork offers to get them some drinks if the fruity drink lady comes back. Mr. Bickley says that he lives in Boulder. He thinks this is going great. The two fellas in leather are staring again, and Penny says those guys give her the creeps. The women want to go somewhere else, and they'll buy Mork and Mr. Bickley drinks. As Mork leaves with the women, Bickley doesn't notice, and he offers to treat the women, and he confides to the waitress that he can't believe what they fell into.
This is the happiest day of my life. Scratch that. My greedy neighbor just ran off with my mother and daughter. Keep it.
Dick, what's keeping you? Come on, you had to get going. The girls are ready to go, and you never guess what happened. They want to take us to a house. You never guess whose house.
Not Theirs?
Close. Yours. Let's go.
And although there's not a line about it, the symbolism of Mr. Bickley spilling his nuts is pretty obvious. In this episode, we get a mix of Mr. Bickley being both cheap and generous. There's a nighttime exterior of the house, and we're back in Mr. Bickley's living room. He turns on the lights, and the women like the apartment. Mork says, "Isn't it nice to have friends over?" Bickley says it's wonderful. Mork says that Mr. Bickley isn't used to having people over. He's kind of a grouch, and they're helping him work that through. And the women don't seem to find this strange. They just seem very charmed by this situation. Mork suggests that they have a game of Parcheesi, but the women want to powder their noses. Mork tells them to not use gunpowder or they'll end up in Utah. Mr. Bickley says the bathroom is just across from the bedroom. After the women exit, Bickley says he's never picked up a girl before. He's been afraid to try it, but it's not too hard. All you need is a little self-assertiveness.
Because if you got it, you got it.
You got it, and we want it.
What was it?
What is it?
A stick-up.
Oh.
All right. Come on, everybody. Up, up, up. Hands up in the air. I don't want to have to scatter you all around the room.
Can't you point that thing the other way?
No, it wouldn't have the same impact.
The women have the men empty their pockets onto the table, and Mr. Bickley complains, "Thanks a lot, Mr. Matchmaker." Mork doesn't mean to be rude, but he tells Penny he thinks her mother is teaching her some bad habits. I think it was Penny who says that they should think of this as charity, and Mr. Bickley says he's hardly ever donated a watch to charity. A car honks, and Lisa says that that must be Mark with the car. And I don't know if Mark was one of the guys in leather or how this little crime ring works. They head to the door, and Lisa unplugs the phone, so that'll slow them down for a little while.
Thank you. It's been nice robbing you.
Yeah, thanks for the date. It's been fun.
Shouldn't we have kissed him goodnight?
There's another nighttime exterior, but this time we zoom in on the upstairs apartment, and we hear Mork saying voiceover that the women were so cute. Mork is talking to what I thought was a sheriff, but I guess is a policeman. I'm not clear on how the uniforms work in the TV version of late 70s Colorado, but it's a brown outfit. Mork thanks him and says that the police will find the women. He says ciao, which he picked up from Susan Taylor a few months ago. And the sheriff doesn't have any lines. He tells Mr. Bickley that they'll get their stuff back, and the girls rob 3 other men from that bar, and the police will have a cookout. Mr. Bickley corrects this to stakeout. Mr. Bickley says he didn't mind talking to a policeman for an hour at this time of night, but he does resent the cop shaking his head and giggling the whole time. And then Mr. Bickley takes a drink from a glass. Mork says this is the new wave, silly cops, and he mentions the show Chips. The Eric Estrada action show had premiered in 1977. Then Mindy comes home. She says that Uncle Jack will be all right. He just had a cork stuck in his throat. So again, they're reducing alcoholism to a joke, and that's it for that whole plot and excuse for Mindy being out of town. She asks about Mork's weekend, and she thinks that he would have run out of things to do and been bored.
Me? Good time, Morky? Bored? We had a fantastic time. Vicky, tell her if you've got any strength left after a wild and wonderful weekend.
He didn't let up all weekend.
Oh, we had a wonderful time. In fact, our company just left.
What company?
Mork and I met a couple of girls.
Yeah, we went to a gymnastics bar. It was incredible. And we met these wonderful friends. And we'll take you, Ben. You can make friends, too.
How friendly were these friends?
Do we look like the kind of guys who would kiss and tell? But Mindy, you should have seen the mother. So beautiful.
I don't think I want to hear about this.
Well, then I could tell you about the daughter. We want to hear about that, huh? Maybe, huh?
I know. I'm a little tired. I think I'm going to go to bed. I'll talk to you about this tomorrow. Good night, Mr. Bickley. Good night, Mr. Goodbar.
Mindy, you never guessed we ran into the governor.
The Mr. Goodbar line is another fairly dark line. The 1977 movie starring Diane Keaton, which was based on a 1975 novel, is about a woman who frequents singles bars, and it ends tragically with her raped and murdered rather than simply being robbed. The men talk about their experience. Mork says that when they were going through it, it was terrifying, but talking to Mindy, it actually sounded good. Mr. Bickley agrees and says that maybe from a distance he can appreciate it rather than at the time when he was going through trauma. And then he trails off and says this is bull. So he remains very cynical. And obviously this experience is not going to help him make friends. Mork says that maybe people only remembered the exciting things. At least they weren't bored, so they accomplished what they wanted to do. Mr. Bickley just wishes the women hadn't robbed them. But he says they'll have a heck of a story to tell their grandchildren. I assume Mr. Bickley did have grandchildren within the next few years, since he had a grown son. I don't think he becomes a grandfather during the run of Mork and Mindy. And as for Mork's parenthood and grandparenthood, that's another story.
Good night, Mark.
Good night, Vic.
Mark, I was thinking.
Saturday night?
7:30.
Be there or be square. There are millions of stories on this planet. This has just been one of them.
In the tag, Mork calls Orson from the living room as usual, but in his mind he's doing a telegraph, and he calls Orson the Incredible Bulk, as I think he has before, and of course that's a reference to the Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno TV show, The Incredible Hulk. Mork tells Orson that he met some people called thieves. Thieves are people who steal things. For instance, jewel thieves steal precious gems and stones. Cat burglars steal pets, which of course is not what cat burglars do. And the Pittsburgh Steelers steal entire cities, and of course that's a pun on Steelers. Orson sort of gets a joke when he says, "Don't tell me Boulder, Colorado got taken." And Mork says, no, just him and Mr. Bickley. Taken as in deceived. Mork says that they got robbed by two lady friends that Mr. Bickley thought they never should have trusted. Orson says that he thought Earthlings believe in trust. Even the dollar bill that Mork sent him says, "In God we trust." Mork says you can't believe everything you read, because the bill also says that it's worth $1, so that's a joke about inflation. He says that the women were pretty and soft. Well, soft on the outside, but hard on the inside, as in hardened criminals.
You mean on Earth your friends will rob you?
Well, if they do, they're not really friends then.
Well, Mindy's your friend. How do you know that someday she won't rob you?
Well, sir, I don't think she's that kind of friend, and even if she were, she'd have to rob me thousands of times just to get back half of what she's given me. So, until next week, give me an N!
N.
Give me an A!
A.
Give me another N!
N.
Give me a big O!
O.
What's that spell?
Nanu.
Wrong! Nano! See you next week, or soon. Nanu. What a chump.
So I thought what they were going to do was have it be N-A-N-O-O-O, but I believe it's spelled N-A-N-U. So it was a cute little thing of Mork tricking Orson after he had been explaining trust. Ironically or not, the way the air dates fall, the next episode would be called In Mork We Trust. So this is definitely an odd episode for a lot of reasons. While it's interesting, I'm not sure how well it works. The thing of the two women turning out to be thieves is kind of a cop-out, no pun intended. It would have been more interesting to see Mork and Mr. Bickley with their different types of inexperience trying to navigate a double date. It's not my favorite Mr. Bickley episode so far by any means, although it is interesting to see this more vulnerable side to him. And we do get Mr. Bickley and Mork bonding, which is nice for their overall arc, although Mr. Bickley does spend a lot of the episode just simply insulting Mork. There are 3 credited guest stars on this episode. As Lisa, we have Ruta Lee, who was then 43, and she's still alive, by the way. She has a TV career going back to the 1950s. At that time and into the early 80s, she would pop up every once in a while, like she's on 2 Three's Company episodes. And she has a very distinctive voice and glamour. She is an attractive older woman of a certain type, and so that feels well cast, that this is a woman who would render Mr. Bickley speechless. As her daughter Penny, we have Robin G. Eisenman, who was then 25, and it's an early TV role for her. She didn't really break through big in any way, but she also did a Three's Company episode where she's Veronica Furley, Mr. Furley's niece, and she's a lot of fun there. I prefer her in that role. Then the other guest star is Lisa Ewan as the nameless waitress. She was then 32, and she had only one other TV role at around that same time, and I'm guessing that maybe she was mostly a model or did stage work. The guest stars are nice. I wish they had better material. As for the usual supporting cast, obviously no Eugene. He would not have fit into this at all, although it is funny that when Mork is thinking about his friends to hang out with, it doesn't cross his mind to call up Eugene. Maybe Eugene was hanging out with his same age friends or something. We get the usual Orson at the end, and it's pretty good. Like I said, it's nice to have Orson do a little bit of a joke, and he's not totally a blank slate this week. He's actually reacting to things more and not just simply saying, "Oh, what is this? What does this mean?" Obviously, the episode is short on Cora, Fred, and even Mindy, because they are out of town in this contrived situation. Cora and Fred are fine in their little scene, and Mindy gets some things to do in her two scenes. Obviously, she's not playing the full range that she's had in some episodes. We get a hint that she is a little bit jealous of what Mork got up to on this double date. It seems odd that she didn't notice the police leaving, but I'll allow that. And we see that it's not easy for her to be parted from Mork for a weekend, and apparently she comes back early because this is only the night of the day that she's been away 24 hours, if that makes sense. So more like maybe she was gone for 36 hours, which is possible. Maybe Uncle Jack got the cork stuck in his throat and there was no point hanging around talking with him, so they came back. So I rate these episodes on a 0 to 4 egg scale, which measures how well an episode fits what I'm looking for in this series. And I was tempted to give this a 2, but there's some potential here, some moments I did like. I wish it was just funnier. If they're going to go in this direction, if it had been just really funny and farcical, that would have been good. Even the things that work have this dark or political tonal oddness to them. But I'm going to go with a 2.5 because of that potential that didn't quite live up to. I do like Mork and Mr. Bickley bonding through this unexpected experience. I think it is good for Mork to get out a bit more. And of course, earlier in the week, but also 18 years earlier, he had learned about relationships and friendships from the Happy Days gang, and so maybe he's putting that into place. I will go with 2.5 eggs. As for the 0 to 4 heart scale, which measures the viability of a romantic relationship between Mork and Mindy, obviously we're not given a lot to work with here because Mindy's out of town. And as in a few other season 1 episodes, Mork's attempts to date other women do not go well. This is probably the most disastrous so far. But I did like in the tag scene how Mork explains that Mindy is somebody he can trust. She will not rob him, and even if she did, she has given him so much. That was nice. And a little hint of jealousy at the end on her side and missing him and so on. I'm going to go with a 1 heart. It's definitely not a shipper's paradise, but it's okay. I wouldn't say skip this episode, particularly if you are interested in the Mr. Bickley character, but it's not the best of the season by a long shot. Not the worst either, though. 2.5 eggs, 1 heart. This is Paula Schaffner with Mork's Night Out. Nanu, Nanu.